Every week, Hillsdale College President Larry Arnn joins Hugh Hewitt to discuss great books, great men, and great ideas. This is Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio.
Morning glory and evening grace, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That music means that the Hillsdale Dialogue is underway. I will be back live on Monday. Dr. Larry Arnn, my guest for this edition of the Hillsdale Dialogue. He and I are wrapping up. We are in London as we speak, and we'll be back on our respective home turfs come Monday. But we wanted to tape before we left so that we would keep the momentum going on my early life. An episode about Winston Churchill and the Boer War, which is really quite an amazing adventure story. It could be fiction, but it begins in the Cape Colony. And Dr. Arnn, if you could just talk a little bit about the Cape Colony. I've got a map to show you, the best map of the time. The Cape Colony is founded by the Brits many hundred years earlier. The Boers come from Denmark, and they come down there and they farm the land in the Cape Colony. And then they go over to that orange area people are watching on the Salem News Channel called the Transvaal and the Orange Free State. And they're surrounded by British colonies at this point. Their Zululand is on their west, and in Rhodesia is to their north. And there's a protectorate there in the Cape Colony. And Wikipedia provides that on the Battle of Majuba Hill in 1881, the final and decisive battle of the First Boer War, a resounding victory for the Boers. So apparently the Brits had tried to take back the Transvaal once, and it hadn't worked by the time Churchill gets around to heading there. What was the beef between the Boers and the Brits?
Well, they didn't like each other. They live somewhat differently. The British are a sea beast, and the Boers, as they were called down there, had become land animals. And in a very worth reading book by Churchill, an early book called, get it right, London to Ladysmith. It's about this war. There's a chapter in which Churchill recounts a conversation in South Africa around a campfire with some Boers. And Churchill asked them what the complaint was, and these Boers replied, they want to treat the Kaffirs as equals. The Kaffirs are mixed race people, but also a more general term for black people. And Churchill comments on that here I had discovered something deeper than the political, the social. The Boers will never admit the equality of the Kaffir. And that Churchill believed all his life that was near the heart of the question. After the Boer War, I'll mention, the South Africa did not adopt the principle of equal rights for the natives in its territory. And knowing that they wouldn't, the British in the settlement with the Boers kept control of all what are called the tribal trust lands. That is to say, where most of the natives, the Zulus, and most of the big native groups lived. That was in British territory. And the British believed that they would be more likely to let them live according to their own ways and under their own rule. So there's the deep things in this fight. And then, another thing, not as deep properly as probably, what kind of people go off from Europe and live in a place like that? British or Boer or anybody, right? They're pretty venturesome. And so they've got their own ways, and they speak Dutch, and they are Boer adapted Dutch, and so they just don't get on. And so they've been having friction for a long time. And
In
then it breaks out into
1897, there's something called the Jameson Raid, and I believe it's all wrapped up with Cecil Rhodes, but they find out that the Transvaal and the Orange Free State's got some mineral deposits in it worth having. So Cecil Rhodes turns his acquisitive eye on it, and he dispatches a raid there, and it's repulsed. The Boers repulse them in their own little states. And from that time forward, page 232, war was approaching for a long time, but it broke out suddenly. Ever it is thus. They knew it was coming, but they weren't ready for it to come. And then in 1899, it breaks upon them. And how would you describe how he describes the feeling about the outbreak of war, not just then, but in 1914 as well?
Well, very exciting. And, Churchill is, when the Boer War breaks out, Churchill is 24. 1914 is 15 years later, right? He's a mature man. He's seen a lot of war. By the time the Boer War breaks out, he had already seen the Battle of Omdurman in the Sudan and was appalled by that. And so Churchill had a healthy respect for the cost of war. Churchill was also an admirer of the ruggedness and, they're pioneers, these Boers, and he admired them a lot. He didn't agree with them about how to treat black people, and that means he didn't agree with them about how to treat all people. But so that issue was there, but he also respected them very greatly. And he also had a great respect, he developed it even more strongly, for their fighting abilities, because that war was very difficult for the British. And it just didn't go well, and it didn't reach a complete and happy conclusion for anybody. And
I want to quote from the book. Before he begins his adventure, and it's really quite a remarkable adventure. It's been adventure after adventure with Churchill from the time he leaves Sandhurst and goes to India, and then to Cuba, and then to India, and then back into the Sudan, and then back to London, and now he's going off. He immediately got hired as a war correspondent. He's out of the army. He said, "Let us learn our lessons. Never, never, never believe any war will be smooth or easy, or that anyone who embarks on the strange voyage can measure the tides and hurricanes he will encounter. The statesman who yields to war fever must realize that once the signal is given, he is no longer the master of policy, but the slave of unforeseeable and uncontrollable events." Thus it has always been, Dr. Arnn.
Oh, yeah.
We got used to easy wars in Grenada and Panama, and a relatively easy. People died. I mean, a couple of dozen people died in Grenada, and more died in Panama. And the first Gulf War had a casualty list that was awful. But we really forgot how hard they could be and how they could be unpredictable in Afghanistan and Iraq. And before World War I, Churchill was writing this. After World War I, he's saying, never, never, never believe any war will be smooth or easy. That ought to be chiseled in the Oval Office somewhere.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think they have the point now. I believe that in the collapse of the previous administration, urgent questions of the national good were decided on narrow partisan grounds, probably often by underlings. So that's not policy, that's irresponsibility. I think there's been a lot of that. I think also we have often operated in a fog of ideology. After the Soviet Union fell, you have to be as old as we are to remember what a long worry that was and how long that went on for. And after it fell, then we're simply preeminent, right? And then there's a wave of new weapons, and we're in the vanguard of that wave, and we could go to a place and we could precision bomb them, not kill as many civilians as mass bombing does, take few casualties ourselves, and sort of place out, right? And of course, taking the short term, that's the new nature of war. It's just not the nature of war. It's not what it's like. And And today, there's new categories of weapons that are very threatening, and it's not at all clear that we're in the lead in regard to them. And
I doubt that we are in regard to all of them. I think we lead. I talked to the president 4 weeks ago now. We're ahead in submarine technology. He thinks we're ahead in Golden Dome technology. I don't think we're ahead in hypersonic technology, and who knows about space. We don't discuss those things, and I don't know, and you don't know, and no one's going to tell us. But I hope we're ahead, but we might not be. The one thing I know we're ahead in, video courses at Hillsdale. Make sure you go to hillsdale.edu for all the wonderful video courses that will make you a smarter, better citizen. Hillsdale.edu. I'll be right back with Dr. Arnn.
It's no secret that Americans are more divided than ever. And it's not just over what policies will improve our great country. No, it's over whether America is great at all, whether America deserves our love. That's why Imprimis is so important. Imprimis looks at the issues of the day from a constitutional perspective, reminding citizens always of our great heritage of liberty. For more than 50 years, Imprimis has featured speeches from the smartest conservative thinkers and writers at Hillsdale events. These days, Hillsdale publishes people like Molly Hemingway, Andy Puzder, Harmeet Dillon, and Chris Rufo. Over 6.4 million American households and businesses receive Imprimis absolutely free. And I urge you to sign up for it today at no charge. To get your free lifetime subscription, go to hillsdale.edu/lifetime right now.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Hillsdale Dialogue underway. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. During breaks, I digress, and I'm on one of those digressions right now, Dr. Arnn. What do you make of Israel's position right now? This is a digression from Churchill, but when they were attacked on 10/7 a year and a half ago, they were wholly unprepared for a war on 7 fronts. I think, but for the suffering, you might say they're in a better position now than when that war began, having defeated pretty much in whole the Hamas terrorists, the Hezbollah terrorists. They're still firing back and forth at the Houthis, but the Houthis are getting the worst of that. The West Bank, Judea and Samaria are quiet, and Iran has been defenestrated of its air defenses. What do you think? Do they think it's too easy now? Oh, and I mentioned Syria collapsed.
Well, probably they are slower to forget than we are because the dangers are very near to them, right? 2 months before that October 7 attack, I was in Israel and I was taken around. Our guide, really great guy, Daniel, was a, part-time Israeli soldier. He'd done his national service. His wife was the same. And they lived 2 miles from where those attacks happened. And, they got little children, right? And he wasn't, he's a tour guide. He wasn't broadcasting, but I asked a lot of questions about it. I doubt if he foresaw what came over that border that night. And then, they probably knew, but they didn't understand the weight of the fact that Hamas had fortified Gaza to such an amazing extent, right? A network of tunnels under everywhere, prepared positions all over the place. Very hard to take that back. And they're still working on it, right? And that had grown over time, and they didn't maybe understand the threat that constituted. I think.
I worry that we don't understand the threat that I don't think there's an abroad now, given hypersonic missiles, and I do not think we fully estimate what Xi Jinping is capable of. Putin doesn't worry me as much because I just think he's somewhat deranged, but Xi Jinping is a killer and a Leninist through and through, and I don't know that a whole bunch of people in our country take him seriously to the extent that he might not just attack Taiwan, but beyond that. But I digress. I want to go back to that spirit. When war begins, everyone's excited. They have a farewell banquet. Quote, Everyone was in the mood of gaiety and heartiness, which so often salutes the outbreak of war. And he goes on to talk about Redver Bullers and General Joffre. Bullers, quote, plodded on from blunder to blunder. Bullers was 60 years old when the Boer War began. Joffre was 63 at the beginning of World War I. Is there an argument that if you're going to lead troops, you ought to be younger than 60?
Well, there's every kind of argument. But, let's say that I had a 61-year-old George Patton and a 42-year-old William McClellan. I'm going Patton.
All right. But he's making a point about Bullers being very slow and very predictable, just like and indifferent to facts. So let's get to the armored train, Dr. Arnn, because we got 15 minutes to do the armored train in. And this is really quite remarkable. He begins with a journey to get to Natal. Can you throw the map up, Harley? He's got to get from Cape Colony, which is down at the bottom there. So he's down at the Cape of Good Hope at Cape Town. And he's got to get up close to where Zululand is, I believe. And he recounts the journey of about 700 miles. He said it was difficult, but I remembered Titus Oakes. Well, I didn't know who Titus Oakes was, so I looked him up. Titus Oakes had a bad go of it. He was a Catholic when it wasn't a good time to be a Catholic in England. And it was bad. And then Churchill says there's an end to everything, and happily nothing fades as quickly as the memory of physical pain. I thought that was well put, Dr. Arnn. Do you believe that?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And if that weren't true, no woman would have a second baby.
True.
So that's right. And if you put that map back up there, first of all, what the devil is Churchill doing here, right? Think how far that is from London. And Churchill is a journalist. And so he's up there towards Zululand. And if you look at that map by the word Zululand, look toward Pretoria, that's where Churchill ends up after the armored train. And how did he get there? It's really crazy. He didn't even want to go because, first of all, I just submit to the strategic judgment of our audience that the path of a train might be predictable. And therefore, there might be some weakness in the idea of an armored train. And Churchill certainly thought so. And he'd been on that dang train once before, and he didn't want to go again. But, there's a picture in the Churchill biography of that, or we can put one on the website. But it's very heavily armored, this train. But it's going to be on these tracks, and it's not going to cut off cross country, right? It's going to go where the tracks are. So where they go, and Haldane, who's a soldier who's watched Churchill fight in the past, and there are many people who were impressed with that, says, come with me. And he likes him, and Churchill's a journalist, and maybe get his name in the paper. And so Churchill doesn't want to go, but he talks him into it, and he gets on the train, and they go. And they go out to another town, I forget the name of it right now. And the train has no way back except the same track it has traversed. It's got to back all the way back up. And so it's backing up, and it gets to a valley, and there's rocky hills on either side, and the tracks are in the bottom of the valley. And they pile some rocks up on the track, and they open fire with artillery and small arms, and the train hurries up. Get away from this, right? So then it rams these rocks, and some of the cars are derailed. And so that's where they are, right? And now they're exposed to gunfire from above, behind rocks, stuck down there in this big old metal thing that can't go anywhere.
With many wounded people. There are many wounded people, and the engineer wants to run away because it's a nightmare. More on the nightmare coming up. It's really one of the more vividly written segments of my early life. They got an illustration. I hope you ordered the volume I recommended that you order, and you can still catch up. You can go and read it. You can listen to the dialogues that we have done. This is like number 8. on my early life, because Winston Churchill's early life is such a remarkable story. They're all collected at Hugh4Hillsdale.com. That's F-O-R, Hugh4Hillsdale.com. For everything else having to do with Hillsdale, the application, sign up for Imprimis, all their wonderful video courses, why have they become the hottest college in the United States among everyone who wants a serious education. It's all explained at hillsdale.edu. Don't go anywhere. I'm coming back with Dr. Arnn right after this. Welcome back, America. That music means we are in the Hillsdale Dialogue. It's always a cue for you to know to stop and listen no matter where you are. I'm usually accompanied, I am today, by Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, which he's helmed for all these many years. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. All of our prior dialogues are collected at Hugh4Hillsdale.com. There are hundreds of them. They're all about topics. Well, they're not all about topics. Every few weeks we talk about current events, but they're topics from Homer to the present. You don't want to miss any of it. And right now we're talking about Winston Churchill and this doggone armored car in which he's involved that will sort of make his bones, as you'll hear over the next couple of segments in the next couple of weeks.
The death count is over 30. Churchill, the journalist Churchill, gets out of the train and walks a semicircle around it, investigating. Reports are there were bullets hitting around him. And he walks, he's not, he appears calm. By his account, he was not calm under fire, but there are many reports that he seemed so to people. And so he opens the door and the men all jump away from the door. And he says, we can get this thing moving. I need some volunteers. And so they work for an hour outside the train. And they managed to move the rocks, use the strength of the locomotive to bump the cars that are derailed out of the way, and then they can go again. But they can really only move the engine and the coal car, so they don't have room for the troops. And so they piled the wind. Now, at one point, the conductor, the engineer, does say he's going to run away. And Churchill says, buck up, man. No one is ever wounded twice in the same battle. I don't know quite where that rule came from. And he says,
I think he made that up.
Anyway, You're going to get a medal, which Churchill would later put him up for unsuccessfully. And then in 1906, when Churchill became Home Secretary, he gave the man a medal. He remembered. But he got the engineer to run the thing, and Churchill's on the locomotive with the wounded and the conductor, the engineer, and he notices that the engineer has got to go up a grade, so he's got to hurry, and he notices the soldiers are not keeping up, so he jumps off the locomotive to be with the soldiers, and that's how he gets captured.
But I want the one thing I've got to get to before we run out of time. He's not only captured, he captured with the Luger, and he's a war correspondent. So, as he points out, in World War I, they would have executed him on the spot because war correspondents are spies if they're armed. And he's captured by a particular person, Louis Botha. And damned if Louis Botha doesn't go on to become the prime minister of the Transvaal and one of his allies in the Great War, along with Jan Smuts. And Botha comes to London after the peace is done and says, "Don't you recognize me? I'm the guy who captured you." It's so ridiculously, absurdly unlikely, Dr. Arnn, that he would be captured by Louis Botha.
Well, the story is a little more meaningful even than that, because everything you said about that you just said, including him talking to Louis Botha years later, is true, except Louis Botha was not there. He was in the area, but it has been proved that he was not the one who captured Churchill.
Oh, no kidding.
But it's very significant that Winston Churchill could never be persuaded that was not true. And against a lot of evidence was put to him. But no, he wouldn't put up with that. And the reason is, if he's going to get captured, it needs to be somebody important. If you're Winston Churchill. so.
Well, he also quotes Napoleon. When one is alone and unarmed, a surrender may be pardoned. And so they capture him, but they won't let him go, even though he's a war correspondent, not because he's got a Luger, but because not every day we capture the son of a lord. And we will get to the escape next week or the next time we gather to talk about Churchill. But we got to talk about the escape at length. We can't jam it into the next segment for the simple reason it's simply unbelievable. It happened. Everybody knows it happened. It's been detailed. We'll have Dr. Arnn talk about it next week at length. And we'll talk a little bit more about this incident when we come back for the next segment of the Hillsdale Dialogue. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Dr. Arnn will be right back.
Hillsdale College is a small, Christian, classical liberal arts college that operates independently of government funding. And we want you, or your son or daughter, to apply. At Hillsdale, students grow in heart and mind by studying timeless truths in a supportive community dedicated to the highest things. Hillsdale College costs significantly less than other nationally ranked private liberal arts colleges and receives regular recognition as a best value, and nearly all students receive financial aid. Our robust core curriculum, vibrant student life, and 8-to-1 student-to-faculty ratio make for an education like no other. For more information or to fill out an application, visit hillsdale.edu/info. That's hillsdale.edu/info.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Dr. Larry Arnn is my guest, and I'm talking with him about Winston Churchill's early life, and he made so many unusual friends, so many people like Botha and Smuts, Dr. Arnn. I wonder what you think about the unlikeliness of this friendship, because they were trying to kill him, and then in 1919, after the Great War, when they've been allies, Churchill notes, he was running the War Department at the time after he'd been brought back from exile, the only person he ever personally led down the great staircase of the Ministry of War was Louis Botha. And John Smuts, isn't Smuts part of the World War II story as well?
Important part, yeah. Churchill and Smuts were genuinely close. They really respected each other. Smuts, when he was in London during the Second World War, would meet with the War Cabinet, a rare privilege. And Churchill valued his judgment very greatly. And Smuts was a great man, and Louis Botha was a great man. Some of the Bothas succeeded him have not been, in my opinion. But these connections, that's one of the things you learn, by the way. Young people should all remember that people you're meeting when you're young, there's a fair number of them you're going to know your whole life. And so your comportment lives on year after year after year, decade after decade. And certainly Churchill was like that. And see, Churchill disapproved of some big things about South Africa. Jan Smuts was of his mind about that too. But
I didn't know that.
That doesn't mean you wouldn't get along with them if you can. For example, I think it's just foolish to demonize Putin unless we're in direct war against them. And the same thing, Xi. It's a good idea to fear those guys, and it's a good idea to watch those guys. But heckfire, we're not responsible for what they do. We just have to defend ourselves. And if we can get along with them, it'll be better. And,
what do you think about Xi Jinping? I don't hate him. I just recognize in him a Leninist about whom I have very grave concerns that his ambitions are contrary to the best interest of me, my family, my grandchildren, and of Catholics in the country like Jimmy Lai, who are in solitary confinement and have been there for 4 years. In other words, he's a dictator. And I know Churchill got along with dictators because he had to. I don't have to. So what is your mind about him?
what you and I think. I think Xi is a complete jackass and an incredible danger. If I were president of the United States, I would be very unlikely to say that.
Yep.
Instead, I would say, we got to watch it. And you just unlock in something you said the key to Winston Churchill's Iron Curtain speech and all decent foreign policy. If they are a danger to us, our first step should be to make it in their interest not to be. And that means be strong and protect yourself. And I think that's what Donald Trump is up to. By the way, did you watch his speech in Qatar with all those adoring Arabs who gave him a multi-gazillion-dollar plane, right? It was a foreign policy that I admire, right? And the foreign policy was, good on you building all this stuff here and living your own life the way you want to. Good on you. That's first. Second, we're going to trade and get on and do great. And everybody's going to do super, right? And third is, anybody messes with America, we're going to kill them, right? That's an excellent foreign policy. And
All right, I want to hit two more points before we run out of time. On page 260, I think this would resonate with you and every other college president out there. He's captured, and he's allowed to live, and he's herded off with the officer. But when you are young, well-fed, high-spirited, loosely guarded, able to conspire with others, these moods carry through nearer to resolve and resolve nearer to action. I thought a lot about your young men who wanted to go to India right away. That's them, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. That's exactly it. That's just like that kid that I talked about last time, who our senior class president, Gavin, who gave a great commencement speech. You can just see those boys in the dorm thinking up that speech. And it's just going to be the great. And, it's very good, too. It's not, it's respectful and full of support for the college and even the things it's building. But they couldn't resist that, right? And that's the spirit.
They get the spirit, yeah.
Yeah,
and,
perfect.
In quick passing, he notes the loss of Franklin. Doesn't give me his first name here. Then a young lieutenant of the Dublins, which I assume to be some regiment that is deployed and escaped with him, later killed in Gallipoli, April 25, 1915. And I noted in my notes in the course of reading it, he never fails to note when someone of whom he speaks dies in the Great War, which is already behind him when he writes this book. He's very careful to memorialize the people in his life who were not as lucky or blessed as he was to carry through to 91. He just pauses for a moment in a footnote to always note that. And I see the hand of intentionality in that.
Churchill was heavily responsible for the Gallipoli campaign, of course. And that means that young man whom he met and admired died in a battle that Winston Churchill helped to cause to happen. And so he didn't have to mention that it was Gallipoli, but he puts that in there too.
And suggesting what as a final comment about Churchill?
The cost of war was heavy on Churchill, and yet he was really good at it. And that is a mark of a great soul.
A great statesman as well. Dr. Larry Arnn, thank you. We will get to the Escape next program, which is otherworldly, improbable as can be, and providential if you ask me, but I'm one prone to such beliefs. Dr. Larry Arnn of Hillsdale College, thank you very much. Remember, all things Hillsdale are at hillsdale.edu. That's hillsdale.edu. All of the prior Hillsdale dialogues, including the many in this series on my early life, are collected at hugh4hillsdale.com. Until next time, thank you very much. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That's Dr. Larry Arnn. Talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. For more information about Hillsdale College, head to hillsdale.edu.